All right, here we go.
Recruiting Boruto recently, you know, like
If that's too low or too high, let me know, folks.
and I
If
got
I'm
back
like
to the
lower,
end
higher.
of part 1. And outside of the fact that chapters 52 to 80 of part 1 of Boruto are some of the best pieces of Naruto content in existence, the last 3 chapters in particular are straight heat. However,
Wait,
amongst all
let's
of
see what
that
he said.
heat
That's a
is
W.
the
What's a
end
W?
of part 1. And outside of the fact that chapters 52 to 80 of part 1 of Boruto are some of the best pieces of Naruto content in existence,
Hey,
the last 3
W.
chapters in particular are straight heat. However, amongst all of that heat is some of the most important foreshadowing and exposition given to us in the entirety of Boruto's
It's a W
run.
NCHammer
those
take.
3 chapters alone, we realize that Ada's charm ability is an extension of her subconscious usage of omnipotence. We're told that omnipotence is the programming code of the entire universe wielded by Otsutsuki gods. We find out that there's no way to break omnipotence, even killing Ada won't stop it. We see Mitsuki really, for the first ever continued and sustained period of time, uses perfect Snake Sage mode. We see the awakening of
About time,
Sakura's
man.
MS. We see Sasuke becoming a rogue ninja again, and Boruto being exiled from the village, and so much more. However, amongst all of that, there is one sentence that's said by Momoshiki that sticks with me to this day, and that is, and I quote, "Have you ever contemplated how many times an Otsutsuki who became a god may have previously manipulated mankind's memories?" Now, these are the kind of things that keep me up at night, because that isn't just something that Momoshiki is saying to try and put doubt in Boruto's head that everything he knows is a lie. That is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing that some of the things that we know about the Naruto universe may not be accurate. See, with the introduction of omnipotence and the fact that there could be several entities out there that are capable of using it, we as Boruto fans are put in a somewhat precarious situation where we have to grapple with the idea that everything we know about the Naruto universe may not be true. And that's really cool. Not only from a reader perspective, but also from an author's perspective. See, because any and all discrepancies, plot holes, or inconsistencies in Naruto's timeline could be explained away through the usage of omnipotence. But it's not even just the weaknesses of the Naruto story that could be explained away with omnipotence. Events that we don't know that much about even.
That's a good point. So, from that, there is the theory that can be made, right? That every plot hole, quote unquote, every inconsistency, every illogical decision made by Shinobi in our eyes can simply be explained away by Otsutsuki intervention or timeline warping manipulation, right? So that's really is a good, perhaps, safety net for the writers. Maybe, you know, when we criticize, maybe even the narrative when we criticize, we could all just say, hey, the Otsutsuki made this guy make this dumb decision, that guy make a dumb decision, etc., etc. You know, that's actually something to think about. And NCHammer has a point with that. It's a W take. Let's continue.
Though we should, could also be explained through the usage of omnipotence. And considering the fact that Jigen was able to get his hands on Shibai's body, which heavily seems to imply that Shibai's body was on Earth, makes it seem as though what Momoshiki claimed about omnipotence being used on mankind's memories before seem all the more likely. And thus today, I want to talk about the events in Naruto's past that could have been altered with omnipotence. Events that range from Earth possibly being turned into a chakra tens of thousands of years ago to the Uzumaki massacre. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, because today we're talking the Otsutsuki killed the Uzumaki. But before we get to theorizing about anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are feeling particularly generous and want to hear me talk about anime and manga that aren't Naruto and Boruto, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
So I gotta add this. I'll try not to pause it too much. Think about it this way, though, right? With NCHammer seemingly implying that Otsutsuki have free reign on warping the timeline and history of Naruto, right? That they could do things to bend to their will. We know the goals of most of these, I would say, Otsutsuki, right? Their goal is to acquire the chakra fruit, to acquire more power, to acquire godlike power, right? More so than they already do. But logically, if you consider if you consider what NCHammer is saying as correct and factual, why wouldn't the Otsutsuki just simply bend history to their will and simply make this effort to acquire the chakra fruit and, you know, the goal of absolute power much more easily, right? Now, that's a fair refutation to the theory that the Otsutsuki could simply just warp all of history to their will and everything goes the way they want it to because of that, right? Why wouldn't they simply just, who knows, just make Naruto bend to the will of them and kill himself and they take, the Nine Tails or whatever, right? The point is that they could just bend everyone to their will. Another refutation to that, though, refuting my own claim to that, is perhaps not all Otsutsuki have the same goal, right? That maybe might not make sense. Right? Like, oh, don't all Otsutsuki want that? But perhaps that's a possibility. We don't know anything yet, right? We're learning more and more about these Otsutsuki. Um, and we do know that Otsutsuki can deviate from the original plan. Like Kaguya, for example, deviated and turned on the Otsutsuki. Shibai, who knows what his goals were? Were they to acquire godlike power? He already has it, right? He already has it. Why would he need to bend the will of others to give him more power? He's already omnipotent in 4D. So there's so many possibilities to consider. So many sort of windows of thought that this creates, right? So it's really interesting. But let's continue. I just wanted to add that in there.
Before we get into all that today, I want to talk to you about one of our favorite sponsors, Rosetta Stone.
All right, let's skip this W sponsor though.
Learning languages is always foreign countries and speak with the people there. Language learning platform. That process, I'm able to make natural connections. Their voice recognition tool is huge. But that's not all. Rosetta Stone is why they focus on teaching you words and phrases that Rosetta Stone today.
Right,
you can get 60% off a lifetime subscription. So what do you say? Sign up with Rosetta Stone today and start off. So,
all right, here we go.
All-powerful narrative plot devices. A good idea or a bad idea? Well, it's kind of hard to say, because while there is absolutely authors out there who write themselves into a corner by introducing all-powerful characters or all-powerful abilities, finding a way to balance those characters and abilities and use them in a way that makes sense and is satisfying can lead to some of the greatest writing in the history of manga. Take, for example, what I believe to be one of the better-ended manga in modern manga history, Fire Force, a story about a boy who's able to fire fire out of his feet to propel himself to be super fast. Well, the story ends with him becoming a literal god and using these god-based powers to create the entirety of the Soul Eater universe, which I thought was one of the more satisfying and fun endings to a popular IP in a long time. Tie this into the fact that the power that Shinra Banchaman acquired by the end of his story didn't change who Shinra was as a person, and therefore this all-powerful, omnipotent being was still Shinra to the core. Now it is still technically yet to be seen as to whether or not introducing something like Omnipotence was a mistake for Ikimoto. Omnipotence is already being used in a way that's vastly improved Boruto as a story, as the way that it's currently being maintained in Boruto is the fact that Ada is only able to use it subconsciously, as she is not only not an Otsutsuki, but not an Otsutsuki god. However, the presence of Otsutsuki gods has been confirmed, and the foreshadowing of their existence all but guarantees at some point in Boruto we're going to be seeing them, and probably not as one of the good guys. But has humanity squabbled with these gods before? Well, there's actually a fair amount of evidence to say that they have. And that it happened long before even Kaguya and Ishiki descended down to Earth 1,000 or so years ago. Because in one of the more talked about pages in Boruto's history, when we first saw the outside of the Kara hideout, we saw that there was 6 individual Otsutsuki insignias. 1 for Ishiki and Kaguya, 1 for Momoshiki and Kinshiki, and 2 that had for some reason or another been destroyed. Why had these marks been destroyed? Why would the Otsutsuki, who are notoriously proud and notoriously loyal outside of Kaguya, either destroy another set of Otsutsuki's insignias or destroy their own? And the answer is that they wouldn't, and that instead that these destroyed symbols could be simply blamed on omnipotence. See, omnipotence is an all-encompassing power, to the point where in Konoha, if you show somebody a photo of the Uzumaki family portrait, people will point at Boruto, even if Boruto's standing right next to them, and say, that's Kawaki. And therefore, when it comes to accomplishing a goal, omnipotence doesn't really leave anything out. And therefore, there's a fair amount of possibility that these Otsutsuki insignias were either destroyed by omnipotence or are purposely being obscured by omnipotence. But
why? Well, take into consideration all of the evidence that we have that Shibai at some point or another was on Earth. We have the set of insignia at the Kara hideout. We have the fact that Jigen, who does have the ability to travel dimensionally and therefore may have found Shibai's body somewhere else, but Jigen did still bring Shibai's body
Dude's
to
about
Earth,
to
so
get into the
Amino
model
could
theory.
apply Shibai's
Let's
DNA
see.
to all of the members of Kara and give most of them Shinjutsu, and how when Momoshiki was explaining about how Omnipotence works, he said that Otsutsuki, who become gods, have the ability to use Omnipotence to code the entirety of the universe, which seems to imply to us, the reader and Boruto, that Shibai is not the only Otsutsuki god, as Momoshiki's verbiage here seems to imply that there is multiple Otsutsuki gods. Then take into account Kaguya's
Wait, let me
Kaguya
re-listen
ended
to
up
that
on
real
Earth
quick.
as the entirety of the universe, which seems to imply to us, the reader and Boruto, that Shibai is not the only Otsutsuki god, as Momoshiki's verbiage here seems to imply that there is multiple Otsutsuki gods. Then take into account Kaguya's
Alright.
story. See how Kaguya ended up.
So he says Momoshiki's verbiage implies there are multiple Otsutsuki gods. And I'm assuming he means in reference to that one manga that he read out that about Otsutsuki's possibly, changing the history more times than just once, or than the omnipotence that we saw from Ida. Now, from my understanding, though, Shinjutsu is usable by all Otsutsuki, right? Like, for example, Ishii's not a Otsutsuki god, but his dojutsu is a Shinjutsu, right? From my understanding. Ida is not a Otsutsuki god, but she uses a Shinjutsu because she has the DNA of Shibai himself, right? Amato, I believe, specifies Shibai DNA, if I'm not mistaken. So perhaps there are more than one, but you could refute and maybe debate him on whether or not Momo's implying multiple Otsutsuki gods. But that's interesting to think about, for sure. Let's continue, though.
Up on Earth is one of the most hotly debated topics in the entirety of the Naruto fandom, because we got two very different iterations on that exact topic. What Kaguya told us in Naruto Shippuden is that she was chasing after seeds of divine trees that fell down from the cosmos onto planets, and therefore after chasing down a divine tree seed on Earth, she stumbled upon said divine tree, but happened to fall in love with humanity, and therefore didn't
Yeah, it is a
want to
contingent on you
destroy
becoming
all
a
of
god
by
among them.
consuming the
Yeah,
chakra fruit
exactly.
that the divine tree created. Well, the story that we got in Boruto is a lot different, as the story that we got in Boruto is that Kaguya and Ishiki descended down to Earth with the intention of turning Earth into a chakra fruit, but Kaguya, prior to allowing Ishiki to eat that chakra fruit, jumps Ishiki and tears him in half. She then herself would go on to consume that chakra fruit. However, regardless of how you look at the situation, there is one unilateral truth. Kaguya eats the chakra fruit, and usually after a divine tree has its chakra fruit consumed, the divine tree withers up and dies, like we see on Momoshiki's planet. Now, this is important, but why is this important? Well, because there's two ten-tails on Earth. There are the nine-tailed beasts and, well, Jura now. But what if what we know about divine trees isn't necessarily 100% accurate? At least in the circumstance of Kaguya, because after consuming the chakra fruit and giving birth to chakra and all of humanity,
What's interesting is that we've seen an
eventually
entirely
uses the
different
very same
design
divine
regarding the
tree that
god
she
when
took
Ishiki
that
was
chakra
talking to
fruit
Code
from,
about it.
which turns her
That's not Shibai,
into the
then
10
Shibai.
tails. The 10
Interesting,
tails
yeah, that is
would
true.
later become the nine-tailed beasts. Now, this seems to imply that the second 10 tails, the juvenile 10 tails, was actually brought by Kaguya and Ishiki to Earth, and that the older 10 tails, the 10 tails that later became the nine-tailed beasts, was already on Earth in the form of the divine tree that Kaguya told us she was chasing after, which tells us there was already a divine tree made on Earth prior to Kaguya and Ishiki's arrival, which seems to tell us that Kaguya and Ishiki were not the first Otsutsuki pair to come to Earth. In fact, most likely what happened is that Shibai and his Otsutsuki pair came to Earth, casted under Infinite Tsukiyomi with the divine tree, and consumed the chakra fruit. And it was most likely this chakra fruit that led to the decimation of Earth, thousands of years prior to Kaguya and Ishiki coming to Earth. And this would explain a lot. It would explain why humanity was in such a nascent period of its evolution when Kaguya and Ishiki descended down. Because, well, yes, you can make the argument that this was technically prehistoric times for the Naruto universe. What if in actuality the real reason that humanity was so primitive when Kaguya and Ishiki came down to Earth is because they were still in a thousands of years long struggle to recover on what used to be a barren planet? planet. That in actuality, humanity used to be a far advanced culture that was bustling and full of life, until Shibai and his partner came down and wiped it out. But Nick, what does any of this have to do with omnipotence? Well, to that, we come back to Shibai's body. See, because not only would Shibai's body being left behind on Earth after he consumed his final chakra fruit serve as a way for the Earth to bounce back from losing all its chakra, but also it would explain why nobody seems to know as to whether or not Shibai was ever on Earth. See, let's say, hypothetically, Shibai does consume a chakra fruit that is the straw that breaks the camel's back on Earth that ascends him to godhood. That means he would have to abandon his physical body and go live in a dimension somewhere. However, prior to doing that, wouldn't it behoove Shibai to hide his body? Otherwise, other Otsutsuki, or even possibly the fledgling humanity that he just wiped out through the medium of a chakra tree, could get a hold of his body and incredible power. And thus, wouldn't it make sense for Shibai if he was truly...
Now, this made me think of, maybe this is what I got this theory from, right? First of all, there are a lot of presuppositions that are not verifiable, right? We do know that Shibai is 4D and that he probably has abilities beyond our understanding, and the way he is present in reality is beyond our understanding, being in a whole different higher dimensionality than every other entity we've ever seen in the Naruto verse, right? He is the only verifiable 4D entity in the entire Naruto verse that we are able to verify up until this point. Firstly, the sort of theory that there was a humanity prior to the introduction of the divine tree, wiping out theoretically the prior humanity, is actually similar to religious scriptures in the real world, right? Where sort of this second coming, like there's a reason why you hear this term, the second coming of Christ, right? Like he came prior and wiped out humanity, whatever many years ago, right? Thousands or whatever the timeline is in religious scriptures, such as the Judeo-Christian Bible. So perhaps from that, NCHammer came to this theory that perhaps humanity was advanced and was at a certain point in history, but that was all erased when Shibai came down and did what he did to the earth, right, with the divine tree and wiping out all of humanity. And he said Shibai and his pair, right? We don't know if he had a pair. We don't know if that's the case, right? That's all theoretical consideration. You could argue that perhaps Earth really was just a desolate place, and that when Kaguya came and bred there, that was the introduction of shinobi, and that perhaps that's not the case whatsoever, right? That humanity just came to be naturally, and there's only been one timeline of humanity. It's all theoretical consideration. It's definitely a very interesting theory to omnipotence and to the idea that it was always there, right? And with this theoretical consideration, certainly plausible. But again, logically, if everyone had the same goals as an Otsutsuki, logically, why wouldn't they make their lives much easier and just make humanity literally bend to their will if they can change the memories and the literal beliefs of humanity on a global scale, right? Which Ida did, was not even in not even an Otsutsuki god herself. So it's a very interesting theory, though, and it makes you think, what about history could be different or could be manipulated by the Otsutsuki? That is a plausible theory. Certainly plausible, certainly interesting. Question is, how did Imago get access to Shibai's cells? Through Ishiki? Most likely, I theorize, right? Because Ishiki is a blatant Otsutsuki and seemingly a higher class Otsutsuki in comparison to Kaguya and Momo, for that matter. So perhaps he has more access to Otsutsuki artifacts or Otsutsuki data or Otsutsuki objects than most, right? But this is certainly an interesting theory. Let's continue.
Going to abandon his body in either the car dimension or on Earth to use omnipotence to erase the fact that he and his partner ever came to Earth in the first place. And here's the beauty of omnipotence. Well, yes, omnipotence, at least as we've seen it from Ada, doesn't work on Otsutsuki. What if it's being fired by an Otsutsuki god? Would it work on Otsutsuki then? We can't say, though we can hypothesize. However, the beauty of omnipotence is that even if you figure out that you've been affected by omnipotence, the way that omnipotence works is that slowly but surely that confidence will wane. And thus, what if the real reason that there's a discrepancy in Kaguya and Ishiki's tellings of their coming to Earth is because
neither of them is entirely sure why they came to Earth in the first place. What if they, like Shikamaru
Okay.
in Chapter 14 of Two Blue Vortex, realized they'd been affected by Omnipotence, but didn't know in what way? They just knew that they had to get to Earth. And by the time that they get to Earth, both of them are simply blinded by the fact that they know that the divine tree that they're trying to harvest the fruit from is one of the most powerful ones they'll ever come across. See, because this not only explains the discrepancy in their story, the fact that there was a divine tree there before Kaguya and Ishiki got there, and the destruction of the insignias at the Kara hideout. If we apply this level of logic and think about how Omnipotence could have been used against humanity in the past, other events in Naruto's history start to make more sense. Think for a second on the Uzumaki massacre, an event that should have been undoubtedly one of the most important events in the entirety of Naruto history, and we know next to nothing about it. And not only do we know next to nothing about it, but the entirety of the idea behind the Uzumaki massacre is one of the fishiest things in Naruto lore. Let me quickly go over pretty much everything we know about the Uzumaki massacre. It happened somewhere between the end of the Second Great Shinobi World War and the beginning of the third one, and that the reason that it happened is because everybody was afraid of the power of the Uzumaki clan. And that is it. But really, when you think about the circumstances surrounding the Uzumaki massacre, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Let's think about the political landscape of the Naruto universe after the Second Great Shinobi World War. For those of you who haven't remembered the exact events of the Second Great Shinobi World War, yeah, I can't say I blame you. The Second Great Shinobi World War is the war that took place largely in the village hidden in the rain. And this is because this war, by and large, involved Konoha, the hidden stone, the hidden sand, and the hidden rain. And for those of you who don't have the map of Naruto memorized, I'm sure we're gonna put it on the screen right now with the power of editing, but the hidden rain exists directly between Konoha, the hidden stone, and the hidden sand. And so far as we know, the hidden lightning and the hidden mist were not involved in the Second Great Shinobi World War. And thus, in terms of Shinobi World Wars, it actually was probably the least grand and wide sweeping out of all of them. However, with all of that said, even though the hidden lightning and the hidden mist may not have been involved in this war, this doesn't mean that the hidden mist and the hidden lightning were yucking it up on the side. Prior to the Fourth Great Shinobi World War and Naruto, just kind of as a whole, none of the ninja villages were even remotely friendly with each other. Especially when you consider the fact that there was only 1 to 2 years between the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars, and that the Third Great Shinobi World War involved every single nation. And therefore, this time period right here is inarguably one of the most tumultuous time periods in the entirety of the Naruto universe. And yet, what we're told about the Uzumaki massacre is that it happens during this time window because multiple villages team up together to wipe out the Uzumaki. Now, while yes, it is a somewhat okay explanation that the hidden mist and the hidden lightning worked together during the Second Great Shinobi World War to wipe out the Uzumaki while Konoha was distracted. And considering that the Minato one-shot has played with Minato's age around the Second Great Shinobi World War, making him 5 to 6 years older than he should be, this is a plausible explanation to how the Uzumaki clan was wiped out. This makes sense when you consider the additional fact that the Land of Whirlpools existed on the coast across from the island structure that makes up the Land of Water. And directly north of them is the Land of Lightning, where the village hidden in the clouds is. And therefore, in terms of proximity, the two countries that were not involved in the Second Great Shinobi World War were the two countries closest to the Land of Whirlpools. However, if it was the hidden lightning and the hidden mist that worked together for some reason to destroy the Uzumaki, wouldn't that be something that was brought up again? See, because, well, yes, obviously the Uzumaki were an incredible strong point for Konoha and the Land of Fire, as Konoha basically had full usage of their Fuinjutsu and their ability to be Jinchuriki. Ironically, Konoha, prior to the existence of Naruto, never fully utilized the Uzumaki as a Jinchuriki in any capacity whatsoever. See, because, well, yes, Mito and Kushina are the Jinchuriki of Kurama, and Mito and Kushina were probably the only two people on Earth when they were alive that could have been the Jinchuriki of Kurama. The mass amount of chakra that is Kurama would have killed anybody who wasn't strong amongst the Uzumaki. However, we saw from the Minato one-shot that other villages had perfect Jinchuriki in the Second Great Shinobi World War and were utilizing them at full power. So much so that the entire plot of the Minato one-shot is Minato trying to create the Rasengan so that if Kushina is used in combat, she has a way to fight back. And thus, if you really think about it, the only village that wasn't using Jinchuriki in the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars was Konoha.
and thus to assume that the other villages were looking at Konoha and the Uzumaki and going, oh, the Uzumaki are too good as Jinchuriki. We need to stomp them out. Just objectively doesn't make any sense. On top of that, if other villages did truly revel in the power of the Uzumaki, wouldn't they try to steal a couple of the Uzumaki while ravaging the village? And yet they don't. We don't see a crop up of Uzumaki in any of the other villages that supposedly destroyed the land of whirlpools. There's no extra redheads running around the hidden cloud or the hidden mist. On top of that, considering how much trouble the hidden cloud has with Gyuki as a tailed beast, and mind you, Gyuki was being passed off from Blue Bee to Killer Bee exactly during this time period that the Uzumaki were supposedly wiped out by other villages, wouldn't it make sense that the hidden cloud, which has actively tried to steal power from Konoha, like in the Byakugan event, where ninjas from the hidden cloud tried to steal Hinata, which led to Neji's father's death, that village with the track record of trying to steal powers from Konoha would try to steal some Uzumaki to either learn their Fuinjutsu or figure out how they get their life forces so incredibly high. I mean, right? Doesn't it seem logical? If the hidden cloud was during the Third Great Shinobi World War willing to send in ninjas.
All right, so here's the thing with the Uzumaki, right? So his theory is it doesn't make sense that they were massacred because they weren't utilized observably. So again, being the type of debater I am, that's an appeal to ignorance, right? Just because we don't see any verifiable Uzumaki utilized in any essential or substantial way doesn't mean that wasn't the case. This actually makes me want to go. Let me show you guys real quick. The one shot of Minato. It actually has Mito kind of explain some level of what happened with the Uzumaki. So I kind of want to see what that's about real quick. Go ahead. So you guys might see it pop up real quick right here. Go back to the video. I'm actually curious to see here the one shot. So there's a page where Kushina's talking to Mito. Where is that at? It's over here somewhere. Go back a little bit. To fill your vessel with. Okay. Believe there's like some history here somewhere with that. You guys might see it on the screen right now. I'm curious now. Let's see here. What does she discuss with her? Trying to look for it real quick, folks. Alright. Seems like you're just going in circles. Your attitude slowly changes. There's this scenery. The thing is that is inside. Okay, so there's a part where she's discussing the. Okay, go back a little more. You're a strong child, even to me. You have much more lustrous red hair than me. No, this is above a spiral, so there's a helix. The spiral is flat and fixed. The Uzumaki form remains unchanging, but a helix is three-dimensional. Okay, so what was the point of it? There's a part where she kind of discusses what happened to them. A clan whose members, whom acclaim as shinobi with proficient life force and silly jutsu from attuning themselves to swirling air currents, our power became fodder for war, sinking us, and now our very existence is in danger of being sealed by those eddies. But our power brought about stability. This house and the family crest jutsu formula on the floor strengthens the ceiling strength of Jinchuriki. So the Uzumaki were fodder, right? That we do know. Mito herself says this. She says the Uzumaki clan is scattered, right? So there is some information on what happened to them. This is canonical, as we all know. They're scattered upon perhaps the nations. We have lost everything because again, they're war fodder. They're not made for combat, right? So going back to the video, despite NCHammer saying we don't see these things happen, doesn't mean they don't happen. Right, the writer simply just didn't include specific details as to what happened to multiple Uzumaki besides Kushina, Mito, Naruto, and Nagato. Right, so it is sort of an appeal to ignorance. To say the Otsutsuki had some sort of intervention or slaughtered them is an interesting theory. My question would be, why would they do that? What is the purpose of the Otsutsuki killing the Uzumaki? Right, so I guess we're gonna get the answer right now. But that is something I wonder. What would be the purpose of that? Of killing anyone, really? They're superior vastly to all shinobi, so. But let's see.
with a fake peace treaty so they could kidnap a child and rip out her eyes to analyze its powers. Why, if they were involved in the stomping out of the Uzumaki in the Land of Whirlpools, wouldn't they take some Uzumaki? The same can be said for the Hidden Mist, as they have a track record of doing scientific experiments on their own citizens to make them into shark people, stealing citizens from Konoha to place tailed beasts in them so they can act as a Trojan horse in the middle of Konoha, and so much more. Why wouldn't they try to learn the Fuinjutsu of the Uzumaki? And thus, the more you think about the Uzumaki massacre, the less it makes sense. Because, well, yes, the Uzumaki were just one village in the Land of Whirlpools. They had married into Konoha. They were Konoha royalty. They have shrines across Konoha dedicated to their clan. Why would Konoha, outside of being bogged down in another great war, allow for the Uzumaki to be wiped out? I mean, without the Uzumaki, they wouldn't be able to control Kurama, the one-tailed beast they have left. So much of their village's power is tied into the Uzumaki continuing to exist. But it's not even like the Uzumaki would necessarily need the help of Konoha. They had their own village for a reason. They were direct descendants of Asura, as related to Asura as the Senju. They were one of the strongest clans in existence. And thus I find it hard to believe that
Okay, so they're not, right? Their life force was, but again, it's been verifiably confirmed that they're fodder for war, right? There's a reason why their power became fodder for war. They're not made for combat. Naruto's an exception because he happens to be the reincarnation rather, of Ashura. The others are not, right? Kushina, Mito. Nagato is an exception because he was given Renegons by Obito as a child, right? So clearly he took advantage of that and became a force of nature. But again, they're not one of the most powerful clans in existence combat-wise. Let's continue.
Would be summarily wiped out by the combined forces of the Land of Lightning and the Land of Water, especially to the degree that they were wiped out. I mean, they were eradicated. The only photo we have of the Land of Whirlpools, the entire city is leveled. And I just don't see other villages doing that level of destruction to an ally of Konoha without it ever being brought up again. So what if in actuality it wasn't the other villages? What if in actuality it was the Otsutsuki? Now I know what you're saying, Nick, that's ridiculous. Why would the Otsutsuki come down and just wipe out the Uzumaki? Well, it's actually a pretty fair question, and I have a pretty fair answer.
Okay.
And the answer is the Ten Paths. See, the Ten Paths are not a Shinjutsu that only Shibai or only Kashin Koji has ever awoken. The Ten Paths are a part of a long list of Shinjutsu that Otsutsuki awaken to as they get stronger. And the Ten Paths are a wildly broken, yet hard to control ability. See, the Ten Paths, as we currently understand them, as they're being used by Kashin Koji, allows for Kashin Koji to see all possible futures on Earth. At least all possible futures for himself. And as he's actively involved in the defense of Earth, that usually pans out to the future of the Earth. However, as we've already learned from Ada and her usage of Omnipotence, these cyborgs who have gained access to the Shinjutsu that were once wielded by Shibai aren't able to use it at the level that Shibai or any Otsutsuki would be able to use it for that matter. And therefore, the level of power and precognition we're seeing from Kashin Koji probably pales in comparison to what an Otsutsuki, and especially an Otsutsuki god, could pull off. And thus, Otsutsuki gods like Shibai, when they get the Ten Paths, are probably able to see all possible futures for the entire universe. And one thing that they would probably see as they saw all the possible futures of the universe was a child being born out of the Uzumaki clan. A child of prophecy. A child of prophecy who would go on to defend his planet from an Otsutsuki in what probably is the first ever recorded instance of a planet actually successfully battling back against an Otsutsuki. This child of prophecy raises the entirety of humanity in a battle against Kaguya, and not only comes out successful, but comes out stronger because of it. And this planet is infested with Otsutsuki chakra because that same Otsutsuki that the child of prophecy defeated had children with that humanity. And thus, through the blood of every single living being on this planet flows the blood of the Otsutsuki, the power to transcend the Otsutsuki. And that very same child of prophecy who defeated his great
I have a refutation to that, but I'm gonna let it finish.
Would
So
go on to have what is probably the real child of prophecy.
After I'll give my thoughts.
A child who one day's fangs may reach Otsutsuki gods. And thus, if this Uzumaki clan does not exist, this child of prophecy and his child of prophecy may never exist. And thus, what if the real real reason the Uzumaki massacre is so cloaked in mystery is because the Otsutsukis tried to eradicate the Uzumaki clan to make sure that a timeline they saw using the 10 paths never came to be. Because the Otsutsuki, just like Kashin Koji, have the ability to see any and all possible futures, especially the futures that involve Boruto getting Shibai's power somehow and using it to kill a god. And thus, what if in actuality, the real reason Naruto couldn't go live with his mother's family was because the Otsutsuki were trying to stop Naruto from existing in the first place. And after completing the task of wiping out the Uzumaki clan and leveling the land of whirlpools, the Otsutsuki responsible for eradicating the Uzumaki clan use Omnipotence to make the world believe that they were responsible for the slaughtering of Naruto's maternal clan. And that's why the entirety of humanity can't necessarily put their finger on how the Uzumaki clan came to no longer be, but has a general grasp of why they're no longer around. This not only explains how an incredibly powerful clan like the Uzumakis were massacred completely, but also explains why we've never gotten a solid explanation of how it happened in the first place. And you cannot tell me right now when Naruto and Boruto are facing down Shibai in 60 chapters, and Shibai is telling Naruto about how the reason he wasn't raised by the Uzumaki is because he raised the Uzumaki to make sure that Naruto was never raised in the first place, wouldn't be one of the greatest plot twists of all time. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that there's other events in the Naruto timeline that can be explained by
Thanks for reacting to this,
interference
Jay.
from the
Very
Otsutsuki
curious to hear your
and
thoughts.
the
I appreciate you,
existence
brother.
of Omnipotence?
Certainly appreciate
Tell me
that.
in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page.
All right, so I certainly have my thoughts on this. So firstly, here's a proof via logical contradiction, right? Because none of this is verifiable. None of it. It's all speculative and theoretical consideration. Now, he says that Uzumaki were killed because the Otsutsuki were trying to stop a reality from occurring that puts the Otsutsuki at risk, right? That stops Naruto rather from doing what he did in the vision that they saw, thanks to having the 10 paths ability and being able to see into the future like Koji Kashin is capable of, right? Here's the problem with the overall theory and where I see the holes in. Firstly, he admits that, while these cyborgs have these abilities, the Otsutsuki gods, right, are able to use it to a much greater extent. So firstly, if I was able to change history in change the fate of the world in such a drastic way, why didn't the Otsutsuki simply, in a much more drastic way, since according to NCHammer, Otsutsukis have these abilities in a much more powerful form, why didn't they simply just change history from long ago? Why didn't they simply just have Minato kill Naruto and change his mind into believing that Naruto is a fucking demon or something like that? They could have done that, right? If I was able to change the mind of the entire Earth, why couldn't the Otsutsuki do something as simple as that, right? Secondly, the Uzumaki are not an extremely powerful clan combat-wise. Again, one of the Uzumaki's leaders or elders admitted themselves that they're fodder for war. They're exploited for their life forces used to be Jinchurikis. And again, just because we don't see all these Uzumakis around during the war doesn't mean that they weren't scattered around. As stated by an Uzumaki, Mito, they were scattered around. They lost everything. Again, this was prior or around the time of the Second Great Ninja War, and Mito is very old, so you can even argue that even perhaps before the Second Great Ninja War, they already were scattered amongst the shinobi verse, right? So those are the holes in his argument, in his theory rather, not an argument, but theory, because it's all theoretical. One, if they're so powerful, why didn't they just cause Minato to kill Naruto? Why didn't they cause the Uzumaki to all jump off a bridge? Why didn't they do something much easier than try to stop a timeline from occurring by killing the Uzumaki and leaving the one Uzumaki that could change everything, that being Naruto? Why did they let him live if they're so powerful and all have these abilities? That's the hole in his argument. Why would they allow that if they all have omnipotence, if they all have the ability to see into the future to even a greater extent than Koji Kashin? Why would they allow that? And again, the Uzumaki are not a powerful combat clan. That's not the case either, as confirmed by very Uzumaki. Now, that's the flaws in his theory. That's why it's very, 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 very unlikely. But what I liked about the video is the thought of history perhaps changing at times due to perhaps an Otsutsuki. That's possible. But here's another thing. He is presupposing that all Otsutsuki have, or at least all Otsutsuki gods, if you believe there are multiple, have the ability of Shibai. The only thing we can verifiably confirm is that Shibai has these abilities, right? Because the cyborgs took and inherited the abilities of Shibai due to Amato somehow acquiring Shibai cells, which is just still a crazy feat. Most likely Ishiki is who provided him these cells, right? So, Damon has the ability to reflect intention. Ida has the ability to use omnipotence. Koji has the ability to look into the future, right? So these are abilities that Shibai once had, most likely to a lesser extent, right? They inherited these abilities. A way to think of it is like, um, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. The individual with the wood style that was with Naruto and Sai and all those people. I gotta look up his name because it's fucking bothering me. Um, Naruto wood style users. I don't know why I forgot his fucking name. Yamato. Yamato. Got it. So Yamato, think of it like Yamato. Yamato has wood style, but to a less greater extent, right? To a far lesser extent than Hashirama did, right? So think of it that way. That's the way I look at it. These cyborgs have these abilities to a less greater extent than obviously Shibai Otsutsuki. Also, there's no verifiable piece of evidence to suggest that, Jay, if you had to guess who was responsible for the Uzumaki massacre, I think in general they were exploited. I think probably multiple villages, infiltrated their village and took them for their own gain, right? Whether that was to use them as Jinchuriki, to study their life forces, to steal their Funjutsu secrets. I think all the above are reasons for their exploitation. So I think multiple villages took it, like Mito implied, multiple villages took advantage of this, which is why they were scattered amongst villages, and they're probably disposed of after the fact, right? Because of the very fact that they could be Jinchuriki, that they could turn on them and become Jinchuriki, and then become more powerful and threatening to villages, right? So I think they were exploited and kind of tossed to the side, if anything. The amount of story. The whole reason I wanted you to react to it, not because of the theory about the Uzumaki, it was because the idea that it's could have manipulated events before is actually genius. Yeah, I do think that's viable. That was the most interesting part to me as well of the video. The very fact that it could have manipulated other events that we're not even aware of. That's certainly viable. Then the question of when did Shibai die? Is he dead? Like, yes, Amato acquired cells from him, which most likely means he's dead. But when did he die? How did he die? It must have been a natural occurrence, right? Because who's going to kill Shibai in a battle? I don't know. I don't think anyone does, unless there was another god that was as powerful as him and also 40 and killed him as well. Where's that god? So there's so many questions to ask here. Um, Very, very good. As well as giving author a safety blanket. Yep, definitely a safety blanket. Things that don't make sense can be explained now with that safety blanket. That was correct. That was probably the best claim that NCHammer made, and I agree. Very good safety blanket as well. We need the first 3 Shinobi Wars animated. Agreed. That would explain a lot, and probably explain Otsutsuki history as well, as it seems to be more and more intertwined with what we've learned of what the Otsutsuki are capable of. More specifically, the Otsutsuki gods, or the Otsutsuki god, if Shiba is the only one. Now, logically, I think there's only one, because why wouldn't Momoshiki explain that there are multiple? Why wouldn't he explain that there are multiple shinobi gods? Why wouldn't that be explored at this point? That wouldn't make sense. The only thing I can think of is perhaps there is an enemy of the Otsutsuki god that is as powerful as Shibai and killed him or something. There's so many possibilities. The number of possibilities are limitless. Very good video though, because of the ideas it sort of sparks up when you watch it, especially the history manipulating sort of abilities that Shibai at the very least has, right? And again, you don't need to be an Otsutsuki god to have a Shinjutsu. Any ninjutsu by the sort of the special jutsu that these Otsutsuki use are Shinjutsu. The dojutsu Ishiki uses, that's a Shinjutsu. First of all, and he's not a god, right? So there's that as well. But very, very good video, I must say. Very, very good video. Very interesting, I must say as well. Makes you think for sure the possibilities of what's to come, what's to come, and very, very well done for sure. But yeah, shout out to Prodigy for that. Appreciate the donations, brother. Also, again, if anyone wants me to react live or actually make a video like like back in the day, just let me know. You can DM me on Discord, follow me on Twitter, just tweet me there, DM me there, whatever you guys want. Let me know. Give a fair price like I did here, and I'll react to a video. Again, let me know. Of course, let me know ahead of time before donating anything. Like, what's the video? Stuff like that. Any requests for the video, stuff like that. Make sure to let me know ahead of time if you guys would like that. Whether it's Naruto, it doesn't even have to be Naruto, Dragon Ball, JJK, IRL, whatever. As long as it's obviously an appropriate topic and stuff. So yeah. But yeah, WW. Did Boruto inherit the Uzumaki life force and chakra pool? I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kakashi stated that Boruto doesn't have the chakra pool that Naruto had. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure he stated that. And that's in the anime, right? So you can argue that's not canonical. Now, Alkins definitely will DM you then. Yeah, I appreciate that, brother, for sure. Anyone feel free to DM me and got y'all for sure. Yeah, so does he have the Uzumaki life force? You could argue this. He is a vessel of Otsutsuki. His body is able to utilize Otsutsuki ninjutsu, and I'm sure that requires vast amounts. You could argue theoretically that more than likely he does, right?